Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into some source material that, well, it gets right to the heart of a challenge many of us face. Building real financial momentum, especially if you're starting out without a lot of capital or, family wealth.
Hmm.
If you follow the traditional path, focusing on education for a stable job, but still feel like there's maybe a missing piece when it comes to actually becoming financially secure or creating wealth, you're definitely not alone in that feeling.
That sense of lacking a clear financial roadmap beyond just get a good job
Yeah,
is incredibly common. Really is.
yeah.
It's a pattern often reinforced, particularly for middle-class backgrounds, where the emphasis tends to be on security through employment rather than the strategies for building significant assets.
Absolutely. And our source for this deep dive is an interesting one. Insights drawn from a YouTube video titled Financial Intelligence: How to Be Rich If Born Poor.
Hmm.
The speaker there shares a perspective, some pretty compelling real life stories, and essentially aims to fill in that missing chapter on wealth creation.
Right. So our goal in this deep dive is to really unpack the core concepts presented in this video, explore the different financial approaches it outlines, and see what practical steps towards wealth creation we can extract from these insights.
All right, let's jump right in then. The source opens by describing that relatable middle class starting point. It talks about growing up with the primary message being, just study hard with very little direct conversation about actively building wealth.
Yeah.
It's all about securing that stable job, isn't it?
It really hits on that common experience. The educational path is framed as the means to an income, but the realization that earning money is just the starting point for something bigger often comes much later, in high school, maybe even well into a career. The force makes a point that rings true for many. This background teaches you how to earn a living and stay within a certain financial bracket, perhaps move up slightly, but not necessarily how to build substantial wealth.
And for the speaker in the source, this realization sparked a change. He mentions seeking knowledge beyond the standard school stuff, specifically referencing Picking Up Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Ah, yes. A book that has certainly influenced a lot of thinking around personal finance. The source draws heavily on a central concept from that book, cash flow.
Cash flow, okay? It sounds like an accounting term, maybe, but the way the source presents it, broken down into three patterns for the poor, the middle class, and the rich, it becomes a powerful lens.
It really simplifies how money moves through your life. According to the source, the cash flow for the poor is very direct. Money comes in primarily from labor or a job,
Uh-huh.
and it goes straight out to cover expenses. There's nothing left over. The cycle is effectively just income equals spending, pretty much.
Earning it, and poof, it's gone. Okay,
Yeah.
what about the middle class pattern? How is that different?
Well, the middle class pattern adds another element, but the source argues it still doesn't typically lead to wealth. Money comes in from a job or work, just like before. But it goes out not only for expenses, but also for liabilities.
Liabilities. Can you give an example from the source? Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, the source points to things like EMIs, monthly payments on cars, houses, phones, maybe even that big TV.
Right.
These are financial commitments that consistently take money out of your pocket every month. The source even suggests some of these might be for kind of keeping up appearances,
Showing off a bit.
maybe. But regardless, they consume income, leaving little to nothing left for savings or, crucially, for building assets.
Okay, so the middle class pattern adds these regular outflows for things that aren't actually bringing money back in. That sets the stage. How does the rich person's cash flow pattern fundamentally differ, according to this source?
This is the critical distinction. For the rich, money also comes in maybe from jobs, maybe businesses, investments.
Hmm.
But the primary destination for that incoming money is different. They use it to acquire or create assets.
Assets. Okay, and what do these assets do?
These assets are defined by the source as things that then generate more money.
Ah, okay.
This additional income flowing in from the assets can then be used for expenses, or maybe more significantly, reinvested to build even more assets. It creates this sort of positive feedback loop where money flows into their pocket from the things they own.
So it's not just about earning a high income, is it? It's about what you do with that income, directing it towards things that bring more money in.
Exactly.
That makes the definitions of assets and liabilities absolutely central, doesn't it? And the source uses Kiyosaki's famously simple definitions.
They are remarkably simple,
Mhm.
almost deceptively so, which I think is part of their power. An asset is defined purely functionally. It's
Yeah.
something that puts money in your pocket.
Got it. Simple enough. And a liability then is just the opposite.
Exactly. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket.
That simple distinction really reframes how you look at everything you spend money on, doesn't it?
It does.
The source uses the classic example of a house here, which, people often call an asset, but under this definition.
Right. The source acknowledges the common perception, but highlights that Kiyosaki labels a personal home, the one you live in, as a liability.
Hmm.
Why? Because money is constantly flowing out.
Uh-huh.
For mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, it's taking money out of your pocket.
So even if its value might go up over the long term, its primary function while you live in it is costing you money month after month.
Precisely. However, the source adds an important nuance here. It points out that if your intention when buying that house isn't just to live there, but primarily to sell it later for a profit, a significant return on investment, or ROI,
Okay.
then at the time of purchase, you're acquiring it with an asset-like purpose. The intention behind the acquisition matters a lot.
That's a really great point. It's less about the item itself, like the house, and more about its role in your personal cash flow strategy.
Exactly.
Now, the source doesn't just leave these as abstract ideas. It brings them to life with some, wow, pretty powerful real-world examples. The first one that stood out to me was the story of the 15-year-old boy making money from YouTube.
Oh yeah, this is a fantastic illustration of that asset-building mindset, emerging really early.
Hmm.
The source specifically emphasizes what he didn't do with that income.
Right.
He didn't blow it on typical teenage luxuries or even the flashy cars you might expect someone suddenly wealthy at 15 to buy.
No Ferrari then.
No Ferrari, no. Instead, the source says he bought a house. This kid, at 15, according to the source, understood ROI, return on investment.
Wow.
He prioritized acquiring an asset that had the potential to appreciate and generate future value over immediate consumption or, showing off.
That's a lesson many adults are still trying to learn. Okay, the second example is an employee earning 50,000 euros a month from Bernassi. How did he apply this thinking?
This story is particularly relevant, I think, because it shows how you can start building assets even while working a conventional job with a, let's say, modest income. The source notes this employee also avoided using his savings on personal luxuries.
Okay, so a similar avoidance of that middle-class liability trap we talked about. What assets did he actually build?
Well, he started small and leveraged local resources. His first asset was apparently a Momo stall set up in his hometown, managed by his father.
A Momo stall. Really?
Yeah, and this generated an income stream back to him.
Simple, accessible, I like it.
Exactly. And he didn't stop there. He then used his income, and potentially some of the Momo stall profits, to acquire cars on EMI, which were also managed by his father. These cars were then used to transport hotel guests in Varanasi for a fee, creating a second income stream.
Okay, so while working his regular 50,000 a month job, he's strategically building these small, local income-generating businesses on the side. What does the source highlight as the key takeaways from his story?
The source points to incredible resourcefulness and creative thinking, finding opportunities right in his own environment, and leveraging family help. It underscores the power of building multiple income streams.
Definitely.
And, perhaps most importantly, the source notes that he wasn't ashamed of the type of work involved, using the Momo cart as the symbol here, emphasizing that any work leading to asset creation is valuable when you're building from scratch. No job is too small, basically.
That not ashamed part really resonates. It connects to this idea that you can start small and build momentum with whatever resources you have, which the source reinforces with that college workshop challenge story.
Oh, the college challenge is brilliant for illustrating the multiplier mindset. Students were given a tiny amount of capital, 100 per person. So about 2,000 grew for a 20-person group and a really tight deadline. Just 2 hours to multiply it.
2 hours to make that Euro 1,000 grow. Wow, that forces creativity under pressure. How did the speakers group approach it?
They didn't try to invent something entirely new or complicated. They looked for a simple existing need right there. It was a hot day, people were thirsty.
Okay.
Buying standard water bottles wouldn't offer much profit margin for quick multiplication, right? So instead, they identified these low-cost water pouches or bags available from a local vendor, costing only about Euro 2 each.
Super cheap. So, buying low. What happened when they started selling?
They went to a busy market area and just started selling the pouches. Initially, they priced them at Euro, saw quick sales. As demand became clear and, the clock was ticking, they raised the price to 10.
Smart.
And crucially, they didn't just pocket the money they made, They immediately reinvested it to buy more pouches from the vendor.
Keep the cycle going, and the result of that rapid buying, selling, and reinvesting within just 2 hours.
They took their initial Euro 2000 and turned it into over 18,000.
Wow, that is a multiplier. That story really drives home the point about the process and the mindset, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The source mentions other groups tried different things too, selling roses, busking, even odd jobs like peeling potatoes in a restaurant nearby.
Yes, which shows variety in execution.
Mm,
But the core lesson the source highlights is universal. The specific task itself is less important than the mindset.
right.
The mindset of identifying value, finding a way to multiply your initial resources, and not being constrained by what seems like small or unimportant work when you have limited funds.
Mm.
And that tight deadline was also a powerful forcing function for action. It made them do something.
These examples really make the abstract ideas of cash flow and asset creation feel very tangible and, frankly, achievable, even from a standing start. This connects to the concept of stability that the source brings up later.
Right. The source argues that relying solely on income from a job, or even just a single business without building other assets, can leave you vulnerable.
Makes sense?
Jobs can disappear unexpectedly, and businesses can face regulatory hurdles or market shifts that impact income drastically. We see that all the time.
Which we've certainly seen happen a lot in the world recently. Yeah.
Exactly. The stability, according to the source, comes from having multiple income streams and different kinds of assets that can weather different storms. Building both businesses and assets provides a much more resilient financial foundation.
It also briefly touches on a historical perspective, mentioning communities like the Benaya community who built significant wealth over generations through really disciplined saving, trading, and compounding assets.
Yeah, comparing that slow, very patient generational process to the potential offered by today's technology and information. The source implies that the fundamental principle of asset creation, which maybe took generations to fully master and leverage in the past, is now something more accessible to learn and apply relatively quickly.
If you have the right information and mindset.
Given the right mindset and tools, exactly.
Okay, but what if someone hears start a business or buy houses and thinks, that's just not me, or I don't have a capital for that? The source does offer an alternative, perhaps more accessible path to asset creation.
It does. Acknowledging that not everyone is cut out for or even interested in starting a traditional physical business, the source suggests investing in the stock market as another powerful way to build assets.
Investing in stocks as an asset. Okay. How does the source frame this?
It highlights modern, pretty accessible ways to invest, specifically mentioning things like ETFs, exchange-traded funds, and mutual funds.
Right, things people hear about.
Exactly. And the source points out a dual benefit here. Not only the potential for the investment value itself to grow over time, but also the possibility of receiving passive income through dividends paid out by the underlying companies or funds.
Ah, so like the Momo stall generating income, a stock portfolio can also put money in your pocket through dividends in addition to potentially going up in value itself.
Precisely. The source even references its own prior content explaining how to learn stock market investing step by step, reinforcing the idea that this path to asset creation is learnable and doesn't necessarily require massive upfront capital or, starting your own company from scratch.
This deep dive has really shifted the perspective, hasn't it? From just earning money to strategically using that money to create more income streams through assets. It feels less about having a specific job or background and more about adopting a particular way of thinking about cash flow.
That really is the core insight, I think. Financial intelligence, particularly when you're building from scratch, is fundamentally about understanding how money flows and deliberately directing it towards assets, things that consistently add money to your pocket. The example showed just how resourcefully and, simply that can start.
It shows that this mindset can be applied incredibly creatively, regardless of your current income level or what you do for a living. It's less about the scale you start at and maybe more about just starting the process, however small.
The key takeaway isn't just knowing the definitions of asset and liability, but seeing how real people, starting with very little, actually applied these principles to build something real.
So here's a final thought for you, the listener, to consider as we wrap up. Take a moment to maybe look at your own current cash flow pattern. Are you mostly earning and spending, perhaps acquiring some liabilities along the way? Or are you actively using some of that income, even a small amount, to build assets that could generate future income for you?
Wow.
And based on the examples we discussed, the Momo stall, the college challenge, investing what potential assets, no matter how small they seem, might already be accessible to you right now that maybe you haven't fully considered as income generators.
Reflect on those different cash flow models and the creative asset creation examples we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Think about which of these principles feels most relevant or potentially applicable to your own situation, maybe starting today.